you're outside the government, you're in the civil society sector, and I know that your organization also does quite a bit of data collection and analysis, but from perhaps a slightly different perspective. So if you can speak a bit about the importance of that and how that data is used, and maybe how that data is also used in communicating with the government and in influencing government decision making.
So, yeah, it's tough. When we're talking about data collection and analysis, we all have a responsibility. That's why we collect it, is to influence policy. We collect it to influence decision making. We collect it to improve our own programs and services and the way that we help veterans and their families. But we're open sourced, meaning that we are a public trust, so we are not owned by anyone, so anyone can request our information at any time. That being said, the VA is one of the major partners of our open sourced collaborative, and it can't work any other way. I think you have to work together in order to really solve these problems. But did you want me to go straight into mine as well, or did you want me to just answer the question?
I want you to just speak whatever you had prepared for us. I know that it's valuable information in any case.
So we talked about the media this morning and the negative narrative of veterans, and just kind of finishing Les's question about, you know, this responsible use of data. There's this nomenclature out there. I'm not sure if you've heard of it over here in Ukraine, that 22 veterans commit suicide a day. Well, if you drill down into that data, the sources were only from 11 out of 50 states. So automatically, from my perspective as a public administrator, that data is moot, as in it's not usable because it's not a broad enough sample survey. But let's just say, for, you know, let's break it down a little bit further. When you look at the data itself that was delivered, yes, 22 veterans commit suicide every day, but they're not returning Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. They're not necessarily combat veterans, most of whom were white males over the age of 60, which is exactly the same rate at which civilians commit suicide. It's just something about white males over the age of 60, that, you know, midlife crisis, that kind of thing. So there's really no correlation to military service. So now there's been this whole movement based around what I perceive as bad data, and Cherie can talk more about suicide data because they're doing a really huge research project with the University of Alabama right now to really uncover what the nuts and bolts, so to speak, of how we can use data to inform change and create change around the process. But there's this whole movement about 22 a day and everything like that, and it's part of that negative narrative that has been pushed out there that doesn't help veterans, that doesn't help our programs, that actually inhibits veterans in many ways. So I work every day with the data that we collect to counter that negative narrative, and I'm proud of that, very, very much so. So I'm going to share a little bit of you from what we've collected at the community level. And like I mentioned, Cherie, she has a lot of data that she's collected from their 7 communities as well. Our community is the second largest population of veterans in the United States, as I mentioned, so it's a pretty good sample size of community-based transition. So I'm not going to take forever to do this. I told Dr. Hunt that I was going to try and beat his time in the last panel, so let's see if I can do that. So the real public dilemma, the real public problem that we face in the United States is that the Department of Defense, which is the largest bureaucracy and the largest employer in the world, doesn't share data, doesn't share service members' information with the communities that they return to, because it's a public privacy issue that service members aren't allowed to opt in to sharing their information with the communities that they return to. So there's an automatic disconnect, and that's why if 2 out of 3 veterans report that they have a difficult transition from military to civilian life, because at the end of the day, we're displaced or dislocated workers coming from one place to another. They do share the data with the VA, but the VA, as Dr. Hunt mentioned earlier, they only serve about 50 to 55% of the population. So there's a big drop off, but also as Dr. Hunt mentioned, the VA only really serves in 3 programmatic verticals: health, benefits, and cemetery administration. So there's another group of social sector programs that veterans need to access when they're transitioning, and that's where we come in, both at Combined Arms and America's Warriors Partnership, which are similar models throughout the United States. So what we did is, in terms of data collection, we put out 2 surveys, one to the veterans and one to the veteran serving organizations, so all of you. The number one challenge that the veterans reported was that they, in transition from military to civilian life, that the resources were too vast and they couldn't successfully navigate that extensive system of resources successfully, and they would give up and not transition successfully. On the veteran serving organization side, their number one challenge that they reported was that they didn't know what the organization on their left and the organization on their right did and how to properly refer to them, and when they did refer to them, what happened to that veteran. So the accountability is lost, right? Shuri mentioned that as well earlier. So Combined Arms, we really set it up to solve both problems. And we took a highly fragmented sector of veteran social services between employment and mental health and housing and all kinds of other things you need in transition, and we conducted a market roll-up into one single technology system. So 42 different organizations, both VA and nonprofit and NGO non-government organizations, essentially list out the resources that they provide. So NextOp is one of the 42 organizations, and we offer 9 different services, from resume writing to career transition and interview coaching and placement into corporate partner companies. The VA would list out healthcare, benefits, and cemetery administration. So we have over 400 different resources that when veterans come through the system, they take a needs assessment. Based on how they answer that needs assessment, it automatically connects them with the organizations that cover down on those needs. And then it's incumbent then upon the organization to contact the veteran, not the other way around. We've completely flipped the dynamic of social services on its head. We hold the organization accountable for when they receive that referral. We timestamp it, and we track the amount of hours it takes for the organization to then contact the veteran, and then the veteran has the ability to leave feedback on how that service was received. So if you've ever used Yelp or Google, the 1 to 5 star rating scale, and then they can leave qualitative feedback in an open entry field. So the organizations are able to improve their services, not only improve their services, but the speed and efficiency at which they deliver their services in real time. And we hold them publicly accountable. So when you walk into our transition center, we literally have a scoreboard like you would see at a hockey game or a football game that shows the organizations and how many referrals they've received and how long it took for them to achieve a successful outcome. This is a bit aggressive in the space, and that's why it's disrupting the space a little bit. Just to wrap up real quick, so in a full year of data collection and analysis, we have achieved a market penetration rate of 2/3, 75% of those transitioning service members coming to our community, second largest in the United States. Fastest growing post 9/11 population in the United States. The top 3 requested services aren't what you think. Number 1 is careers. So veterans, 40% of those coming through the system are looking for help in career transition and professional growth. So showing that they want to make an economic impact on the communities they return to. Number 2 is social connectivity to fellow veterans. Meaning that they want to share that camaraderie and enjoy that camaraderie and that network that they had in the military. And number 3 is volunteering in their community. So signing up for Team Rubicon or Mission Continues or another organization to socially and to continue their service that they had in the military and make a social impact on the communities they return to. So it's not mental health programming, it's not housing, it's not financial assistance. Benefits is still very high because everyone will need access to that for education and otherwise, but the top 3 are very positive things that change that dynamic and that negative narrative. We are working with the House Veterans Affairs Committee, which is the equivalent of what Chairman Tretyakov leads here in Ukraine. to change the policies for DoD, the Department of Defense, to allow service members to opt in to share their contact information with the communities they return to, and hopefully that will save millions in marketing and outreach dollars that NGOs and the VA spend every year, and billions of dollars in unemployment benefit payouts and other social programming payouts that can, if we can prevent veteran unemployment and speed that transition up, then we can prevent social isolation, family challenges, homelessness, criminal behavior, and most importantly, suicide. So that's all I have to say, and I'm sorry about the time, but appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you, John, and thank you also for the tremendous efforts you're doing in your sphere of work. So basically, from what you said, veterans having served their country, they continue to want to serve their communities. And that's something very important to bear in mind.